Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. The morning sun filtered through the large windows of the military academy, casting golden rays onto the gleaming parquet floor. In the main hall, the new recruits stood at attention, their gaze fixed on Captain Jonathan Harris, a man with a stern face and perfect bearing, renowned for his unwavering authority and strict discipline. Every movement he made seemed to impose discipline on all those around him. Among the crowd of young recruits, Elena Carter advanced with measured steps. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight bun, her eyes shining with quiet determination. Beneath her immaculate uniform lay a sharp mind and inner strength, ready to face any challenge. Jonathan reviewed each recruit, scrutinizing their every move. When he reached Elena, a small detail in the exercise she had just performed caught his attention, a slight imbalance in her posture. Without warning, he raised his hand and slapped her with a force that made everyone present flinch. "You call that professionalism?" he thundered, his voice booming like a thunderclap. "Even a rookie soldier could do better." Elena remained motionless, breathless, a flush rising in her cheeks. The slap wasn't just physical, it carried the weight of public humiliation. The other recruits averted their eyes, uncomfortable, while a few murmurs rippled through the room. Yet, despite the pain and anger seething inside her, Elena showed nothing. In her mind, only one thought formed: he doesn't know who I am, but he will. For Elena was no ordinary recruit. She was the daughter of General Marcus Carter, the respected leader of the U.S. Army. A man whose very name inspired respect and sometimes fear. As Jonathan continued his inspection, unaware of the identity of the woman he had just humiliated, Elena slowly straightened up. Every muscle in her body was tense, every thought focused on a single idea: to transform this humiliation into strength and show that no one, not even Captain Harris, could underestimate her. The hall, still filled with the murmur of the recruits, now seemed charged with a silent tension. Elena had received the slap, but it was Jonathan who would soon discover that appearances were deceiving. And in this academy, where discipline and hierarchy reigned supreme, a silent battle had just begun. The next morning, the military academy seemed even colder and more solemn. The immaculately maintained white walls reflected the harsh glare of the fluorescent lights, accentuating every movement of the recruits. In the training yard, Captain Jonathan Harris critically observed every detail. His reputation for strictness was legendary, and he liked everyone to know it. Elena stood among the other recruits, her face impassive, her fists slightly clenched behind her back. The slap from the previous day still stung her cheek, but she had learned to channel her anger into an icy resolve. She knew that showing her frustration would only reinforce the captain's arrogance. Jonathan walked towards her, his boots echoing on the concrete. His gaze, usually stern, seemed strangely intense that morning. "Carter," he snapped, his voice sharp. "This time, I want to see perfection. No mistakes. Understood?" Elena nodded her head, a simple movement, but every fiber of her body was ready to react with precision. The exercise began. The recruits had to execute a series of complex maneuvers, combining speed, coordination, and strategy. Jonathan walked past them, inspecting each movement. When he reached Elena's back, he noticed her fluidity, her concentration. His brows furrowed slightly, but he said nothing. Yet, despite his obvious progress, Jonathan couldn't ignore a certain tension in his mind. He had humiliated Elena the day before, and now he watched, almost anxiously, the precision and composure she displayed. It was frustrating. How could a recruit maintain his composure after such a public humiliation? Elena, meanwhile, observed the captain's every reaction. In her mind, she analyzed his gestures and expressions, searching for the perfect moment to turn the tables, without ever revealing her identity. Every move she made became a silent challenge, to prove her worth, to show that strength and intelligence are not linked to rank or anger. Suddenly, an unexpected obstacle arose during the exercise, an error in the formation of a neighboring group. Without hesitation, Elena intervened, calmly guiding several recruits to correct their trajectory. Her precision and immediate leadership drew attention, and even Jonathan seemed surprised. "Very well," he murmured, more to himself than to anyone else. "Not bad, Carter." Those words, simple as they were a strange mixture of recognition and reticence. Elena received them without smiling, but a slight shiver of satisfaction ran through her. She knew it was the first sign that he was beginning to see her differently. When the exercise ended, Jonathan walked away, leaving behind a palpable tension. The other recruits spoke in hushed tones of Elena's incredible composure, completely unaware that she was General Marcus Carter's daughter. She, for her part, stood straight, her mind already planning her next moves. The slap from the day before was not a painful memory, but fuel, a silent promise that the one who had humiliated her would soon understand that he was not dealing with an ordinary recruit. And in the silence of the training ground, the invisible war between Elena and Jonathan had barely begun. The next day, the academy seemed even more ruthless. The recruits, exhausted from intensive training, moved like automatons under the watchful eye of Captain Harris. The shouts, the orders, and the pounding of boots on the ground created a symphony of strict discipline. Elena, for her part, moved forward with unwavering focus. Jonathan's slap still echoed in her mind, but she had learned to transform it into a silent strength. Every humiliation became fuel, every cruel word an engine to surpass herself. In a corner of the courtyard, Jonathan watched from a distance. He couldn't help but recall the previous day's exercise. Elena had executed each movement with surprising precision. Her composure after the slap unsettled him, and for the first time, he felt a kind of tension he had never experienced with his recruits. A part of him began to wonder, who is she really? Why does she remain so impassive? During the day's exercise, the recruits had to navigate a complex obstacle course, simulating a battlefield. The other participants struggled, slipping, stumbling, and losing their focus. But Elena moved with fluidity and confidence, anticipating each obstacle and adjusting her movements with almost military precision. A young soldier, disoriented by an obstacle, nearly fell. Without a word, Elena grabbed his arm and straightened him, guiding the group toward the optimal trajectory. The other recruits began to whisper among themselves. "She's incredible. How can she remain so calm?" Jonathan, who had just passed by them, frowned. A simmering anger mingled with his admiration. He didn't like feeling unsettled, and yet Elena did it without even trying. After the exercise, as the recruits lined up for the debriefing, Jonathan approached Elena again. His gaze was more calculating than stern, and his voice betrayed a slight hesitation. "Carter, you did well today. But don't think that will erase your performance yesterday." Elena looked him straight in the eyes, calmly. "I never forget what I've been put through, Captain. But I know how to get back up." A silence fell. Jonathan swallowed hard, taken aback by her maturity and composure. He had never met a recruit capable of transforming humiliation into quiet strength. And deep down, that bothered him. Elena, for her part, was thinking. She knew the key wasn't to respond to every provocation, but to subtly plan her revenge. Every exercise, every move, every interaction was a step in a strategic dance. She had to be patient. Revealing her identity too soon would have destroyed the element of surprise. That evening, in her room, Elena reviewed every moment of the day. The slap, Jonathan's look, the whispers of the other recruits. Everything was part of a picture she was painting in her mind. She murmured to herself. "He thinks he's humiliated me, but he doesn't know that he's the one who's going to learn what it means to underestimate someone." Meanwhile, Jonathan lay awake in his office, replaying Elena's thoughts in his mind. The slap, her unwavering composure, a first crack in his arrogance was beginning to appear. And for the first time, he felt challenged, not by an ordinary recruit, but by a force he didn't yet understand. The silent war had just taken a new turn. The following morning, the academy once again echoed with shrill orders and the pounding of boots on the floor. But today, something had changed in the air. A murmur of anticipation rippled through the recruits. They had all noticed Elena's performance and wondered if she would surprise Captain Harris again. The lieutenant in charge announced the day's exercise, a complex tactical simulation depicting an urban combat scenario. The recruits had to develop strategies to secure a building and neutralize unforeseen obstacles. Jonathan, stationed on the observation deck, scrutinized every movement intently, his eyes never leaving Elena. "Carter," he called, his voice firmer than ever. "I want to see if you can think like a true strategist, not just an obedient recruit." Elena nodded, a faint, barely perceptible smile on her lips. Inside, she relished the challenge. It was the perfect opportunity to prove her worth without revealing her identity. The exercise began. The other recruits rushed forward in a disorganized fashion, often hampered by confusion and the urgency of the simulation. But Elena analyzed each obstacle methodically. Her eyes scanned the terrain, anticipating simulated enemy movements and potential mistakes by her teammates. "Follow me," she shouted suddenly, instinctively taking command. She precisely assigned roles, corrected the recruits' trajectories, and coordinated actions so that every movement had maximum impact. Jonathan, watching from the gangway, felt his jaw tighten. Elena's movements were fluid, calculated, and incredibly efficient. Every decision seemed instinctive, yet he could see the logic behind each choice. It was frustrating. He didn't like being impressed, least of all by someone he had humiliated. As the simulation reached its climax, an unexpected obstacle arose. A locked door blocked access to a key area. The recruits panicked. Elena, calm as ever, quickly assessed the situation. "Mike, go around to the left. Sarah, cover the entrance," she ordered. "I'll unlock the door. Stay focused." In a matter of seconds, thanks to her quick thinking and ability to remain calm under pressure, Elena solved the problem. The astonished recruits followed her without hesitation. The exercise ended in resounding success for her team. Jonathan finally stepped off the gangplank, his face marked by a strange combination of frustration and respect. He stopped in front of Elena, his eyes searching for words. "Carter," he began, his voice trembling slightly. I must admit that you exceeded my expectations today." Elena looked at him calmly, her expression impassive. "Thank you, Captain. I only did what was necessary." Inside, however, she rejoiced. Each victory was a step towards the revenge she had been preparing since the slap, a silent demonstration that her strength was not only physical, but intellectual. Jonathan, for his part, remained motionless for a moment, watching Elena walk away. For the first time, he felt a mixture of anger and admiration. This recruit, he thought, was no ordinary one, and he wasn't yet ready to understand how much she would change his perception of discipline and authority. The tension between them had just crossed a new threshold. The silent war was no longer just a matter of pride, it was becoming a subtle dance of strategy, patience and power. The next day, the atmosphere at the academy seemed to change. The recruits who had observed Elena during the last two exercises gathered discreetly, whispering amongst themselves. Her composure, strategic intelligence, and mastery in complex situations were now the talk of the town. "Did you see how she handled the course yesterday?" a recruit whispered to his neighbor. "Incredible, and without a single mistake," replied the other, his eyes wide. Even those who had previously underestimated Elena found themselves admiring her quiet strength. And of course, these whispers eventually reached Jonathan Harris's ears. From his observation post, he watched Elena with a newfound focus, a mixture of irritation and curiosity. How could she inspire so much respect and fear at the same time, when he himself had tried to belittle her? His pride as a man and as a captain was taking a hit, and he felt his orders gradually losing their absolute authority in the face of Elena's mastery. Today's exercise was less physical and more intellectual, a real-time decision-making simulation where every strategic choice could influence the success or failure of the operation. Elena, as always, concentrated intensely. She analyzed the positions, calculated the risks, and proposed solutions that even Jonathan could only silently admire. At the end of the exercise, the lieutenant in charge of the evaluation addressed the group. "Congratulations to the Carter team for their coordination and efficiency. Your leader displayed remarkable composure. Murmurs of admiration rippled through the room. Jonathan clenched his fists, unable to hide his frustration. He approached Elena, his gaze filled with a strange mixture of reproach and admiration. "Carter," he said in a calmer, but firm voice, "you are clearly more than just a recruit. But remember, discipline is not just about intelligence or talent. It demands obedience, and I will never tolerate anyone thinking they are above that." Elena met his gaze without wavering. "I understand, Captain. But I believe that true discipline is knowing how to act competently and calmly, even under pressure." The silence that followed those words was heavy with tension. The other recruits averted their eyes, aware of the silent confrontation between the two strong minds. Jonathan, for the first time in a long time, felt that his traditional methods were insufficient against a recruit who combined talent, intelligence, and strategic patience. In the quiet of her room that evening, Elena reflected on the day. Every gesture, every observation, and every word exchanged was part of a larger plan. She knew that Captain Harris's slap was only the beginning. True revenge wouldn't be immediate. She had to wait for the perfect moment, prepare her strategy, and choose how and when to reveal her true identity. And Jonathan, alone in his office, thought of Elena with a fascination he had never known. He realized that the recruit he had humiliated was gradually becoming an enigma he had to understand, all the while unaware that he was already in a battle he couldn't easily win. Tension was rising in the academy. The whispers, the respect, and the growing fear towards Elena created an invisible playing field where a silent war was being waged between her and Jonathan, a battle of wills and strategy that was only just beginning. The sun had barely set when Captain Jonathan Harris announced a simulated mission that would put the recruits to the test. Today, they had to secure a strategic building in the heart of a simulated urban area, with obstacles, traps, and unforeseen situations. The stakes were clear, only exceptional leadership could guarantee success. Elena felt a surge of adrenaline. Every simulation was an opportunity to showcase her skills and mastery, but this one was far more difficult than anything she had faced before. She took a deep breath and surveyed the terrain, analyzing every detail: barricaded windows, narrow corridors, elevated vantage points. The recruits were nervous. Several hesitated, some panicked at the obstacles. Jonathan, on his observation platform, wore a barely perceptible smile. He knew this simulation would reveal everyone's weaknesses. But he didn't yet know that Elena was going to surprise him. "Carter," he shouted. "This mission is crucial. Show me you can manage your comrades and make the right decisions under pressure." Elena nodded, her firm voice resonating. "Team, listen to me. We're proceeding methodically. Stay alert and follow my instructions. No rushing." From the outset, Elena assigned roles with surgical precision. She placed recruits at strategic points, anticipated potential mistakes, and guided those who panicked. When a group nearly stumbled upon a booby-trapped obstacle, she intervened instantly. "Mike, cover the right. Sarah, step back and secure the passage." His orders were short, clear, and effective. The recruits began to carry out their tasks with a composure they had never shown before. Even Jonathan, observing from the gangway, felt a shudder of astonishment mixed with frustration. The mission reached its climax when an unexpected obstacle simulated a structural collapse, halting their progress. The recruits panicked, but Elena remained motionless for a moment, analyzing the situation. Then, calmly, she gave the necessary instructions to bypass the danger and secure the objective. In a few minutes, the mission was successfully accomplished. The recruits, exhausted but impressed, gathered around Elena, their eyes shining with admiration. Jonathan finally stepped off the gangplank, his fists clenched and his face impassive. He approached Elena, unable to hide his mixture of irritation and respect. "Carter," he said slowly, weighing each word, "I have to admit that you saved this mission. Even though I don't like to admit it, you're impressive." Elena met his gaze, impassive. "Thank you, Captain. The mission is complete because everyone followed instructions. That's all." Inside, she silently savored her victory. Every exercise, every simulation, every interaction with Jonathan reinforced her position and affirmed her strategic superiority. The past defeat was now nothing more than a memory transformed into fuel. Jonathan, for his part, remained motionless for a moment, watching her walk away with the team. For the first time, he understood that he couldn't reduce Elena to a mere recruit. She was intelligent, quick, and capable of handling situations that he himself found difficult. And without realizing it, he had just become a pawn in the silent battle that Elena was waging with patience and strategy. Tensions at the academy escalated. The invisible war between Elena and Jonathan had just reached a new level. He now knew that she was not only talented, but that she possessed an intelligence and composure that could one day surpass him. In the days that followed, the academy seemed less predictable to Captain Jonathan Harris. Every exercise, every simulation reminded him that something about Elena was beyond his usual control. He observed her every move, her decisions, her interactions with the other recruits. But despite all his vigilance, he couldn't understand how a recruit could remain so calm, so strategic, and succeed where others failed. That morning, a new simulation was announced, a high-pressure rescue mission where speed and coordination would be essential. Jonathan assigned Elena a partial leadership position, while keeping a close eye on her. From the start, Elena naturally took charge, gently but firmly correcting the recruits' movements. Every decision seemed instinctive, yet perfectly calculated. Jonathan felt an unusual frustration rising within him. Despite his authority, he couldn't ignore her competence. At the end of the exercise, as the recruits regrouped, Jonathan approached Elena, a mixture of respect and suspicion in his eyes. "Carter," he said, more quietly than usual, I'm beginning to wonder, you're not exactly what I thought you were." Elena met his gaze, a faint, almost imperceptible smile on her lips. "I'm simply doing my job, Captain. Nothing more, nothing less." Jonathan frowned. Something about her demeanor deeply disturbed him. She wasn't just a competent recruit, there was a calmness, a confidence, a mastery of situations that far exceeded what he expected from a young recruit. For the first time, he began to consider that he might have underestimated someone, and he didn't like that feeling. Meanwhile, Elena continued to observe Jonathan. She knew exactly how to maintain control of the situation, never reveal her identity too soon, never let her pride show. Every gesture, every word she uttered was calculated to prepare for the moment when her revenge would be complete, and when Jonathan would finally understand the extent of his mistake. In the academy's corridors, whispers about Elena's abilities were becoming increasingly frequent. Recruits were beginning to see her as a role model, a guide, even without knowing her full name or background. This frustrated Jonathan even more. The respect she inspired was beyond his control, and each recruit who admired her represented a small, silent victory for Elena. That evening, as the lights of the academy dimmed, Elena sat at her table, reflecting on the day. She knew that Jonathan was beginning to see her differently, to feel a tension he had never experienced before. And she rejoiced inwardly. The slap, the public humiliation, were now just a memory, replaced by patient anticipation. "He suspects something," she murmured to herself. "But he doesn't know anything yet. And when the time comes, he'll realize that underestimating Elena Carter was the biggest mistake of his life." Jonathan, alone in his office, couldn't stop thinking about Elena's successes. Part of him wanted to challenge her, to test her even further, to understand the source of her composure. But another part, a part he didn't like to acknowledge, felt a mixture of respect and fear. He knew he was facing a force he didn't yet fully understand, and it unsettled him like never before. The silent, subtle, and mental war had just crossed a new threshold. Neither Elena nor Jonathan had yet revealed all their cards, but both knew that the game had only just begun. The tension in the academy had reached an almost palpable point. Every recruit knew that something was going on between Elena Carter and Captain Jonathan Harris, even if no one could guess the extent of the silent duel. That morning, Jonathan announced an advanced tactics exercise, designed to test not only the recruits' physical strength, but above all their ingenuity and quick decision-making. They all had to devise strategies to secure a complex perimeter with limited resources. "Carter," he shouted, his voice sharp, "This time I want you to show not only your intelligence, but your ability to lead under pressure." Elena looked at him calmly, her eyes shining with a determined glint. She knew this was the perfect moment to start turning the tables. Yesterday's slap and the humiliation of the past were now nothing more than silent fuel. Today, she was going to show Jonathan that she was much more than just a recruit. The exercise began. The other recruits rushed forward nervously, trying to find the best approach, but often panicking in the face of obstacles and unforeseen decisions. Elena, on the other hand, analyzed the situation with cold precision. She anticipated mistakes, reorganized the teams, and made bold but perfectly logical decisions. When Jonathan tried to correct a bad decision made by one of the recruits, Elena subtly intervened. "Captain, if we redirect the team to point B instead of point A, we will secure the area in half the time." Jonathan stopped, surprised. His voice trembled slightly, not from anger, but from the irritation he was feeling more and more. "Carter, are you telling me how to handle this exercise?" Elena remains impassive. "I'm simply proposing an optimized strategy, Captain." Every action she took was calculated to demonstrate her competence without ever crossing the line into insubordination. The recruits, observing the scene, began to carry out her instructions with astonishing efficiency. In less than 20 minutes, the simulation was a success, far exceeding the expectations of Jonathan and his superiors. Jonathan, his fists clenched, felt a wave of mixed frustration and admiration. For the first time, he realized that this young woman he had humiliated was not only competent, she surpassed him in his own sphere of authority. "Carter," he said finally, his voice low but firm, "you excelled. But don't forget that I'm still the captain here." Elena looked at him calmly, her expression impassive but her spirit triumphant. "I never sought to place myself above you, Captain. But I sought to do what needed to be done." In her room that evening, Elena finally allowed herself a slight smile. Every step of her silent strategy was working. She was gaining the recruits' respect, destabilizing Jonathan, and preparing the ground for the moment when her true identity would be revealed. Jonathan, alone in his office, couldn't stop replaying Elena's every move. Part of him wanted to challenge her further, to test her limits. But another, more uneasy part knew that he was facing an adversary unlike any he had ever encountered before. Elena's subtle revenge was underway, and Jonathan didn't know it yet, but every success she achieved brought him inexorably closer to the moment when he would understand the magnitude of his past mistake. The academy was shrouded in tense silence that morning. An alert had been triggered. A major incident simulation was underway in a complex building, with several hazardous areas and victims to rescue. This time, mistakes could be costly, at least within the context of the exercise. Jonathan watched the scene from the observation deck, his features stern and tense. He knew that this scenario would test not only the recruits, but also his ability to lead and react to the unexpected. From the outset, complications arose. Teams scattered, some recruits panicked, and a simulated collapse blocked access to a key area. Jonathan gave precise orders, but he quickly realized that some decisions had to be made on the ground, instantly. Elena, who was leading an adjacent group, took note of the situation and intervened immediately. "Captain Harris, the main structure is unstable. If we follow your plan, we risk losing precious time. I propose we bypass it via the northern sector, secure the casualties, and then regain central control." Jonathan felt a pang of irritation and urgency. He knew Elena was right, but his pride refused to admit it immediately. However, faced with the urgency and the risk of the exercise failing, he had no choice but to accept. "Very well, Carter. Do as you say. But know that I'm keeping an eye on you." Elena simply nodded, giving her instructions calmly and authoritatively. Under her direction, the recruits advanced methodically, securing dangerous areas and assisting the victims with impressive precision. Every movement, every decision seemed coordinated, anticipating problems before they even arose. As the simulation progressed, Jonathan watched with a mixture of relief and frustration. For the first time, he was completely dependent on Elena for the success of a mission. Each success of the team she led confronted him with a paradox: he had to acknowledge their effectiveness while refusing to be further humiliated. When the simulation ended, all the recruits were safe and sound, and the objective had been achieved with impressive success. Jonathan stepped off the gangway, unable to hide his tension. "Carter," he said finally, his voice slightly trembling, "you saved the mission. Although I can't say I'm happy to admit it." Elena looked at him calmly, her expression impassive but her spirit triumphant. "The mission was successful because we all worked together, Captain. And I thank you for the trust you had to place in my decisions, even though it wasn't easy." Jonathan looked away, feeling both frustrated and impressed. For the first time, he understood that Elena was not just a talented recruit, but a true strategist capable of outperforming her superiors when the situation demanded it. In her room that evening, Elena reflected on the day with controlled calm. Each victory, each silent acknowledgement, each wise decision brought Jonathan inexorably closer to discovering her identity. But for now, she savored the subtle control she wielded. He depended on her, and that strengthened her power in this invisible war. Jonathan, alone in his office, thought about Elena. Part of him felt humiliated for having had to accept her advice, but another, deeper part recognized that he was facing an exceptional force. And despite himself, he began to wonder how far this young recruit could go. The indirect confrontation had changed the dynamic between them. The silent battle continued, but now Jonathan knew he could no longer underestimate Elena Carter. The morning was clear and calm at the academy, but an invisible tension hung in the air. Jonathan Harris watched the recruits, still sensing Elena's strategic presence at every turn of the exercise. Today, he had decided to test a particularly complex simulation, one that required speed, coordination, and critical decision-making. But Elena had decided that this would be the perfect moment to unleash her ultimate weapon. She knew that patience had been her greatest strength so far, but it was time for Jonathan to understand the magnitude of his past mistake. The simulation began, and as always, Elena took command with precision and composure. The recruits, inspired by her leadership, progressed efficiently. Jonathan, for his part, observed every move, fascinated despite himself by the mastery she displayed. As the exercise reached its climax, Elena made a bold move. She decided to circumvent a strategy Jonathan had imposed, optimizing time and resources to reach the objective before him. The mission was a complete success. Jonathan stepped off his gangplank, his anger mixed with admiration. "Carter," he began, his voice tight, how did you manage to make the right decision before me?" Elena took a step forward, her gaze direct and confident. Then, in a silence that sent a shiver through the academy, she declared, "Captain Harris, I suppose it's time you knew the truth. I'm not an ordinary recruit. I'm Elena Carter, daughter of General Marcus Carter, Chief of the U.S. Army." An icy silence fell over the assembly. The recruits murmured, some with wide eyes. Jonathan, frozen to the spot, felt his breath catch. His mind reeled, the slap, the humiliation, all the times he had underestimated her, and now, the revelation hit like a thunderclap. What?" he stammered, unable to find the right words. You're General Carter's daughter?" Elena nodded calmly. "Yes, Captain. And you forgot something important yesterday. You humiliated someone you should have respected from the start." Jonathan felt a wave of shame and guilt wash over him. Every time he had belittled her, criticized her, or slapped her, it all came back to haunt him, amplified by the authority his father held. Yet, looking at Elena, he saw not vengeance in her eyes, but a confident, almost regal calm. I. He murmured, unable to finish his sentence. Elena continues. "I am not here to humiliate you, Captain. But to show you that strength lies not only in rank or title, but in courage, intelligence, and determination." The room fell silent. Jonathan slowly lowered his eyes and took a deep breath. For the first time, he fully accepted the magnitude of his mistake. "Carter," he said finally, his voice softer, more humble, I apologize for everything. For the slap, for my words, you've proven your worth 1,000 times over. Elena gave a faint, almost imperceptible smile. Thank you, Captain. I knew you'd understand sooner or later. At that moment, the balance of power in the academy shifted. Elena was no longer just a competent recruit, she was a force that Jonathan deeply respected, an adversary he could never underestimate again. And as silence fell once more over the academy, a new feeling took hold, mutual respect, reconciled tension, and the certainty that, sometimes, patience and strategy surpass all methods of brute force. The academy seemed calmer than ever the next day. The recruits, though still subject to strict discipline, regarded Elena with a newfound respect. The revelation of her identity had shaken not only Jonathan Harris, but the entire atmosphere of the institution. Jonathan, for his part, felt changed. The slap, the humiliation, and all his attempts to test Elena had been transformed into powerful lessons. Before her, he now saw not only an exceptional recruit, but a true strategist, capable of surpassing his authority without ever breaking it. Elena entered the training room with a confident step, her eyes calm but determined. Jonathan watched her, a mixture of respect and admiration in his eyes. Captain Harris, she said, politely but firmly, I am ready for the next exercises. Jonathan approached slowly, a softer expression on his face than he had ever shown before. Carter, you've shown me something I'll never forget. That competence, patience, and intelligence are just as valuable as authority. He hesitated for a moment, I'm proud of you. Elena nodded, a slight but sincere smile. Thank you, Captain. And know this, true strength does not consist of humiliating others to feel superior, but of recognizing potential and respecting it. The recruits present, silent, watched this exchange with astonishment. They understood that something important had just happened, that the relationship between the captain and Elena had just changed profoundly. Jonathan took a deep breath and added, with a slight smile. From today onward, we will work together. You are a force to be reckoned with, and I am counting on you to guide others. Elena, proud but humble, replied. I will do my best, Captain. But remember, patience and strategy are my allies. For the first time, Jonathan felt a true partnership forming, a solid mutual respect that transcended pride and authority. The past hurt, the tension, the frustration, all of it had been transformed into a lesson and into admiration. In the days that followed, the academy saw Elena continue to excel, this time not just as General Carter's daughter, but as a respected leader, a silent and undisputed force. Jonathan, for his part, learned to see her not as a recruit to be controlled, but as a strategic partner. And as the sun set over the academy, a new era of respect and collaboration began. The silent war was over. The slap, once a symbol of humiliation, had been transformed into a victory of patience, strength, and strategy. Elena Carter had not only proven her worth, but she had also taught Captain Harris a lesson that neither he nor anyone in the academy would ever forget: underestimating someone can be the biggest mistake of your life.